Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa, Varudika Acharya Ashtotar the Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayo Mr. Pad Paramahansa, Varudika Acharya Ashtotar the Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Kokti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Narayana Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, our translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashtaprayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavat Yuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil, and loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On his 27th day of January 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace HG Dravida Swami Prabhupada. We are in Canto 5, The Creative Impetus, Chapter 12, Conversation between Maharaj Rahugana and Jadabharat. Text number 13. Yatrottama shloka gunanuvadaha prastuyate gramyakata vigataha nishevyamano anudinam mumukshor matim satim yachati vasudeve yatrottama shloka gunanuvada prastuyate gramyakata vigataha nishevyamano nudinam mumukshor mating satim yachati vasudeve yatrottama shloka gunanuvada prastuyate gramyakata vigataha nishevyamano nudinam mumukshor mating satim yachati vasudeve yatrottama shloka gunanuvada prastuyate gramyakata vigataha nishevyamano nudinam mumukshor mating satim yachati vasudeve yatrottama shloka gunanuvada gramyakata vigataha nishevyamano nudinam mumukshor mating satim yachati vasudeve yatrottama shloka gunanuvada prastuyate gramyakata vigataha nishevyamano nudinam mumukshor matim satim yachati vasudeve yatrottama shloka gunanuvada prastuyate gramyakata vigataha nishevyamano nudinam mumukshor matim satim yachati vasudeve. Ladies? Not yet. Zoom? Zoomland?
Yes, Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Go ahead, chant.
Yatrottama shloka gunanuvadaha
Yatrottama shloka gunanuvadaha
prastuyate gramya katha vidhataha
prastuyate gramyakata vigataha
nishevyamano nudinam mumuksho
nishevyamano nudinam mumukshor
matim satim yachati vasudeve
matim satim yachati vasudeve yatra In which place? In the presence of exalted devotees. Uttama shloka guna anuvadaha. Discussion of the pastimes and glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prastuyate is presented. Gramikatavagataha, due to which there is no chance of talking of worldly matters. Nishevyamanaha, being heard very seriously. Aduninam, day after day. Mumukshoho, of persons who are very serious about getting out of material entanglement. Matim, meditation. Satim, pure and simple. Yat chati is turned. Vasudeve, unto the lotus feet of Lord Vasudeva. Translation. Who are the pure devotees mentioned here? So this is going back to the previous verse. So one has to take a bath in the foot dust of the pure devotees in order to get out of the material world. Who are the pure devotees mentioned here? In an assembly of pure devotees, there is no question of discussing material subjects like politics and sociology. In an assembly of pure devotees, there is discussion only of the qualities, forms, and pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is praised and worshipped with full attention. In the association of pure devotees, by constantly hearing such topics respectfully, even a person who wants to merge into the existence of the absolute truth abandons this idea and gradually becomes attached to the service of Vasudeva. Purport. The symptoms of pure devotees are described in this verse. The pure devotee is never interested in material topics. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has strictly prohibited his devotees to talk about worldly matters. Gramya varta nakahibe. One should not indulge in talking unnecessarily about news of the material world. One should not waste time in this way. This is a very important feature in the life of a devotee. A devotee has no other ambition than to serve Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This Krishna consciousness movement was started to engage people 24 hours daily in the service of the Lord and in His glorification. The students in this institution engage in the cultivation of Krishna consciousness from 5 in the morning to 10 at night. Sometimes he says 4 in the morning. They actually have no opportunity to waste their time unnecessarily by discussing politics, sociology, and current events. These will go their own way. A devotee is concerned only with serving Krishna positively and seriously. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chukshu Unmilatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara, the disciplic succession. So, it's a very logical question. Just like we have, or a very logical next verse, you say. Just like if you go to the third canto, 25th chapter, 20th verse, you'll find the beginning of the Sadhu Sangashtaka, 8 verses in teachings of Kapila Dev, right near the beginning of his teachings to his mother, in which he's glorifying the association of sadhus. So the first verse is Prasangam Majanam Pashamatmana Kavayo Vidu Saheva Sadhu Shukato Moksha Dwaram Apavatam. So here's the benefit. He says, I'll give you I made it into a little poem. Mundane attraction, mundane affection keeps us tied to birth and death infernal, but love for sadhus opens wide the doors to life eternal. So the next question is, who are the sadhus? How can I find them? I want to get out of this material world. So then the next few verses describe the qualities of the sadhu, beginning with Tatikshava Karunika Suridak Sarvadehinam, famous verse, which are perfectly applicable here. The previous verse described that Rahuganata Tapasanayati, that I'll just read the translation real quickly. Oh, it's a long one. My dear King Mahugana, unless one has the opportunity to smear his entire body with the dust of the lotus feet of great devotees, one cannot realize the absolute truth. One can't realize the absolute truth simply by observing celibacy, strictly following rules and regulations of household life, leaving home as a vanaprastha, accepting sannyas, or undergoing severe penances in winter by keeping oneself submerged in water, etc. So the idea is that he's going through various examples of how people undertake austerities for purification, so forth. But that doesn't lead, in and of itself, to the realization of the absolute truth. One has to have contact with the pure devotee, and the whole idea of bathing in the foot dust is to surrender and hear. The first service one does is hearing. There's a quote I'll give you later. I made some notes here. At the end of one famous purport, where Prabhupada says basically the first qualification for going back to Godhead is the eagerness to hear about Krishna. That's the first thing. So, having understood that, I have to find a pure devotee and bathe in his foot dust and surrender and serve and hear. Who are they? How can I find them? So it's interesting that he gives this first qualification of what they hear and chant about themselves. And that is that in the assembly, there's no question of discussing material subjects. So the whole process of bhakti begins with Shravanam. There's 9 processes that delineated by Prahlad Maharaj, and the first is Shravanam. But the question is, okay, what are we going to hear? Who are we going to hear from? And how are we going to hear? Now this comes up at the very beginning of the Bhagavatam. The very second verse of the Bhagavatam glorifies the Bhagavatam itself. Dharmak projita kaita bhota pramonam atsadanam satam. First of all, the qualifications of the candidate. This is understood only by those who are free of envy. Nirmatsadanam satam vedyam. Vedyam means understood, and free of matsara, which is envy and lower modes. So that's the first qualification. But then near the end of this verse, I won't go through the whole thing, he says, King Vaparad Ishvara Sadjodid Jabadu Jate Chachadviku Shushabis Tachanat. He says this Bhagavatam was compiled by Vedavyas in his maturity. It's his last work. And simply by hearing it with this attitude of Shushushabe, which means ardent hearing or submissive all reception, Prabhupada translated, one can have the Lord manifest in one's own heart. So what is the need of any other scripture? In other words, we want God realization. There's nothing beyond that. And if you can get it from hearing Bhagavatam, that's it. You know? Of course, we have other books that really are based on Bhagavatam. Lord Chaitanya based his entire movement on the Bhagavatam. And he understood it to be the actual commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, which condenses and summarizes all the wisdom teachings of the Vedas. So the Bhagavatam is so dear to the devotees. So that word Shushushabe is key. That's the attitude of hearing that we find again and again in the Bhagavatam shown. Arjuna had it, you know, when he gave up his argument with Krishna in the beginning, then he surrendered, then he had this ardent hearing. And then it's shown ardent by pertinent questions. That's one of the processes, having pertinent questions. So it's interesting, he mentions, what's the first quality he mentions? That they don't hear and chant, they don't discuss anything but transcendental subjects. So what we hear and what we speak, and secondarily what we read and what we write, is going to be the major portion of our content of our consciousness. That's why you go to school, what's the first thing that happens? You got to sit quietly in class, first grade, you know. Stop making noise, Bobby. Sit, listen, right? How many times? So you're hearing, because the knowledge is coming from the teacher. You know, so similarly, the transcendental knowledge is coming from the Supreme Teacher, Krishna, through the chain of disciplic succession. And what's the qualities of the members of the disciplic succession? The primary quality is that they're, as Prabhupada would say, transparent via media, meaning that they're channels, they're pure channels, without distorting it or any kind of material motivation for the message. And they themselves have realized it. They're experienced it. So they have authority in speaking it. That's the whole point of acharya. Acharya comes from the word charya, which means activity. And Prabhupada gave these 3 qualifications. A real acharya has understood the essential teachings of the Vedas, the scripture, living according to it perfectly without deviation, and takes the trouble to teach it. Those 3 things. And so the acharyas are the ones who we need to find and approach. So this theme here, I wanted to share some other going through it. The Bhagavatam is filled with this. The whole Bhagavatam is, after all, a conversation, right? It's Shukadev speaking to Pariksit, but it was heard with one point of attention by Sutta Goswami. We can hardly even conceive of his attention, of his receptivity. 18,000 verses, and he memorized them all just by hearing once, and he was ready to repeat them. It's amazing. We can hardly remember from one moment to the other. If we want to memorize a verse, we have to go over it over and over it again, right? And then the next day again review it, then share it, right? And even then, if you don't use it, then gradually they start to, fall out of your memory. So that was the kind of brains they had back then. This is one of the qualities of Kali Yuga. Everyone's always disturbed because there's so much noise, there's so much static, there's so many other things going on. Now I've been here for a long time. I've noticed a difference in climate, but more importantly is the mental climate. You can tell because there's a whole culture of aggravating you by driving down the road with no mufflers. You notice that? Suddenly it's a deafening sound, or a motorcycle gang coming, and they want to aggravate you. They want to make, it's para dukkha sukhi. It's called Schadenfreude in German. It became famous during the war, which means taking pleasure in others' pain. So this is the world we live in. So how to attain that? Well, this is what the morning program is all about. Because most of the people who are into that, they crash, at midnight or 11, 1 o'clock, and then and that leaves the Brahma Muhurta, a very quiet time, when you can hear and chant, Brahma Muhurta is very important. Prabhupada wanted to come to Mangalarti with the proper mentality. So, some other references here. Here's one that I wanted to share with you, because this verse really struck me when I first encountered it, and I memorized it right away. This is in the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's the 15th, third canto, 15th chapter, 23rd verse. And Lord Brahma, he's describing description of the kingdom of God. It's quite amazing. And then the question was, who goes? Who gets to go there? And who doesn't get to go? So this verse is about who doesn't get to go. Yanna Vrajanti, they don't get to go. Vrajati means to go. Agabidho vachanano vada chinbanti henya vishaya kukata matigni. Yastu shuta hatabagaya nibadata sadas tang pancha sadane shuta maksuhanta. Very dramatic. The last word in this verse is alas. So Brahma himself is lamenting here. So what this verse says is that they don't get to go to Vaikuntha, who here, Srinvanti, other subject matters besides that describing the pastimes and the activities and qualities, a name of Agabida. Agabida is he who destroys all sin. It's a name for Krishna. What happens? Yastu Shuta, by hearing those vibrations, all your good fortune is taken away, Hatabagaya, and Atasadas, your interest in the ultimate goal of life, the essence of life, is completely obliterated. And tang chapanti, those topics themselves throw you down to a place which is very dark, which is defined in the darkest part of material existence, devoid of all shelter, alas. So this is all about what you hear. This is what you hear in chant. So much of our sadhana is acquiring a taste for hearing and chanting, beginning with the holy name, but then the books of Srila Prabhupada, the transcendental vibrations he's giving us it so purely. Now, they're unique. You may pick up a Bhagavad Gita, there's hundreds of them in English. But why is Prabhupada's unique? Because it's as it is, it's spoken, given by a realized soul. And so that just comes right off the page. The faith, the realization, the sincerity, Why is he doing it? Why is he taking so much trouble? For our benefit, the compassion. That's why if you're open to it, as some of us were, it immediately changes your life. You don't want to put it down. You want to search out those people who are actually practicing this. So that taste, that ruchi for hearing is essential to acquire. Now that brings up another subject: how do you get the taste? And that's, if you read the Bhagavatam, it won't be long before you come to the second chapter of the first canto.
Yes.
Hello? What was that?
I'm muting her, don't worry.
Okay, Hare Krishna. So what do we find? We find the discussion of what is that Dharma. The question is by the sages in Naimisharanya. What is that Dharma by which the soul can be completely satisfied? And of course it's Bhakti. It's that activity which leads to pure devotion. Savai pung samparo yato bhakti arhokshije. It's wonderful. They pick each word so carefully. He doesn't say Krishna there. He says another word for Krishna, arhokshija, which means the transcendent Lord, beyond the reach of your material mind and senses. So why does he choose that name? Because when we start this Dharma, we have to have faith. We can't see Krishna directly, and even the deities, we don't know what the significance is. So we need the faith in a person who is telling us, who is speaking to us, again the Acharya, that this is real, and that I want to take up the process, of course, beginning with chanting of the holy name. So that Dharma, which leads to a service to Adhokshaja, characterized by complete absence of material motivation and uninterrupted. Both of those qualifications, that will satisfy the self. Where do you find that religion today, which is completely devoid of material motivation? You find just the opposite. Mega churches. Why are they mega? Because they're offering prosperity religion. In other words, if you come and you give a donation, bigger donation you get, the better. Then you'll become prosperous. You become successful materially. It's right out in the open. It's a complete perversion of religion. And so it goes on, and eventually it gets to the point of how can one attain the sword of remembrance by which you can cut all the attachments to the material world and become attracted to Krishna. That's the key. You call it yadanu nyasana yukta karma grunti nabandhanam chintanti kovidastasya konakuya kataratim. It says this sword of remembrance. Anudyasana literally means the sword of anudhyana. The word dhyana is in there, and asina is the sword. Karma grunti nabandhanam. So we're bound up by all of our material desires we've cultivated since time immemorial, our karma. This is the way that we're bound to this material world. But remembrance of Krishna will cut those knots. The Hridaya Granti, they call them hearts, knots in the heart. So, how to get it? So he gives the formula. Tasmad ekena manasa bhagavan sattvatam pati shrotavya kirtitavyascha dhyayas pujascha nityada. This always is important. Always means at the last verse. So, with one pointed attention, you can't just go through the motions. Then you're into niyamagraha. My body is there, but my mind is somewhere else. No, you have to be completely focused and concentrate. Ekena manasa bhagavan sattvatam pati. So he gives Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the master and the Lord of the devotees. What do you do? Hear about him. That's what we're hearing. And chant about him. And meditate on dhyayak. And worship pujas nityada always. So this is the means of getting it. And then the next verse was, with this sort of remembrance that you've gotten by this process, you'll cut your knots. But then the question is, who would not be attracted? And the answer is, a lot of people. There's only a dozen of us here. How to get the attraction for Krishna Katha? That's what the whole process is, to get more and more attracted where you can't live without it. You drink it like the most, and I'll have some other verses that in Bhagavatam is filled with that. How sweet it is, right? Maduram, madura, madura mekam. We hear about the holy name. But we ourselves are falling asleep, trying to chant the holy name, or the mind is going here and there. But the nature of it is the sweetest thing that you never want to stop hearing. So we need to cultivate that. So that's the verse that I was leading to. Here's how to get that attraction for Krishna Katha, which is simultaneously you become detached and unattracted to other Katha, which is Kukata. We can remember that word. Kukata, which destroys your intelligence. That's part of the word, the verse I said about who gets to go to Vaikuntha. Kukata matigni. So that's the key. Shushusho shadadhanasya vasudeva kataruchi syan mahatsevaya vipra punyatirtana shevanat. It comes by serving the great devotees. With faith, Shushusho shadadhanasya vasudeva kataru. That ability to hear with faith. Without faith, you get bored. This can't be right. They've just made all this up. It's a myth. I got so much I got to do. No, this is the most important thing that in all your lifetimes, to actually have an opportunity to hear genuine Krishna Katha from a pure source is the greatest treasure. What did we hear about this morning? The touchstone, the story of the touchstone and Sanatana Goswami. It's very cogent. So, the Shushusho word comes up again. You remember it was there in the second verse of Bhagavatam. And that's this ardent hearing, this one-pointed submissive oral reception. So, a couple of other cogent verses here, references from Bhagavatam. We find in that series of verses I mentioned as the Sadhu Sangashtaka, there's a very famous verse about this prasanga. Prasanga means intense association, not just the superficial, but with great attention and with feeling. So it begins with prasanga manjaram pasham. We have so many intense attachments to this world, really intense. And if we can't fulfill them, sometimes we get so depressed and we get so many attachments to loved ones, to things, to places, all kinds of things we develop. So that's the Ajaram Pasham, very powerful ropes that are binding us. So that same word is used here, satam prasangan mamavirya samvido. In associating with the satams, the great devotees, we have to develop that same eagerness and that same relish of association. So what's going to happen in that association? Mamavirya samvido. You're going to hear, this is Kapila Dev speaking, so he's speaking about himself as an incarnation of Krishna. You will hear talks and conversation and glorification of me. Bhavanti ritkana rasayana kata. And those who are pure, who are somewhat advanced, they will experience that talk of Krishna as rasayana, a life-giving elixir. Rasayana kata. And this process, Tadjoshanat Ashu, by engaging in this process of liberating the soul from the bondage of matter, Apavarga Vartmani, the path of liberation. By engaging in it, one will develop Shraddha. First thing is faith. Your faith will be increased, because here are all these devotees who are themselves so blissful and knowledgeable and clearly peaceful and detached. And you say, oh, this is what I want to be like, rather than my old miserable self, where I'm completely absorbed in material sound vibration. So Shraddha and Rati, you become attracted to Krishna, and Bhakti, pure devotion, Anukramishan, step by step. And the next verse, I won't go through the whole thing, but he talks about this is the easiest process, Rijubir of yoga. It's like it fits in exactly with Lord Chaitanya's movement, the kirtan. The essence of this hearing and chanting is Sankirtan. Kirtan. Hearing the holy name, chanting the holy name. Prabhupada says, I chant, you hear, you chant, and I hear. This is the program. But the quality of the hearing makes all the difference, and the chanting. So that quality improves the more that we're following the principles. Now, the progressive relish or development of taste for hearing and chanting will certainly decrease our taste for material things. But the process, it was so conditioned that we need a sadhana, bhakti, where there are rules, regulations, of do's and don'ts. Yes, you should. If you're living in the temple, certainly you have to come to Mangalartik, you have to come to class, you have to chant your rounds, And, don't fall asleep. Get up, chant, here. So the mind is rebelling. So much conditioning. It's all the mind. We heard this from Jada Bharat. It's all the mind. The mind is everything that we're working on in any yoga, any serious yoga. So those do's and don'ts need to be embraced. That's why at the end of the third chapter, which is all about lust, it's all about material desire, at the very end, it said, Tasmat tvam indriyan yado niyam yabharatarshaba. Oh, best of the Bharatas. In the beginning, therefore, you have to control the senses. Not by just repressing them, but by engaging them in Krishna's service. That's the only feasible process. In this way, conquer over this sinful enemy of lust. We're living with our worst enemy. We got so much material desire, and we got our mad mind. Krishna says the mind is the best friend and the worst enemy. So what weapons are we going to use? What allies are we going to use? Krishna has come in the form of his holy name. If we embrace him and we make the effort to chant and hear, it's a minimum number of rounds, the kirtans, be there. You have to be there. And I'm telling you, it's such a different experience in kirtan, because we sing, of course, the Hare Krishna mantra is the essence of it. But there's also the Panchatattva mantra. So there's those 5 personalities, Lord Chaitanya, Nityananda, Advaita, Srivas Thakur, and Gadadhar. It's worth reading about them, reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita, learning who they are. So that when you hear about Advaita, it immediately says, oh, how merciful he was to pray for Lord Chaitanya's advent, that Krishna would come. And you know something about his relationship with Madhavendra Puri. That comes to mind, just like if I say Govardhan. Oh yeah, I remember him. He's kind of a squat guy, but he's a great book distributor, gives wonderful class, all these different things. It's more than just a name. There's a whole thing. Plus, the songs we sing. The Gurvashtaka, the Mangalartik. So important. Samsara dhava nada lidala. Oh, I can feel the heat. You know the meaning. That's the whole thing. I mean, this world is filled. Prabhupada talks about literatures that, you can read. Yeah, I know, but that, there's also the video and the sounds, and there's a virtual reality, and there's a metaverse, and there's a million different ways you can get totally distracted and condemned in this world by the sounds and the sights of Maya. Very, very powerful. So to have the strength to turn away from all that and absorb ourselves in Krishna thought, that takes discipline at first. We have to cultivate it. And it may be bitter in the beginning, but it's nectar in the end. We find that in the Bhagavad Gita, that the real pleasure is there when you develop your ability to taste it. So that's what's being described in this verse, that when we have the great opportunity to find the pure devotees who are completely devoid of any desire for material sound vibration, and they just want to immerse themselves in pure sound vibration. What was Prabhupada doing? What did he do for 12 years? There was only a couple hours a day when he was sleeping, when he wasn't either chanting, reading, typing. That blessed typewriter. He's typing with 2 fingers. He typed the whole first canto out that way. Because the people need this. This is their only hope. My duty is to give them, the vibration, the purity, and he put everything in that first canto. And then, he trusted in Krishna, came to America with nothing, externally, but treasures of faith and all the things that he had, Bhakti, and Krishna behind him. He had Rupa Goswami's blessing, his spiritual master. No one could see that, but he felt it. And then despite all the difficulties, he persevered, and here's what we have. You have a society, worldwide society with books in so many languages, and the internet. And go to dandabats.com. There's so many treasures on there you can see. So, but then the question is the taste, and the taste comes from chastity, from being able to say no. I used to relish all that. Forget it. I don't want to do that anymore. Because we have all these vasanas, we have all these latent desires that we've cultivated. And we're trying to cultivate the blessed desire for hearing about Krishna, serving him, chanting about him, being absorbed. And I was just, we have such a treasure now. Of course, Srila Prabhupada's books are the supreme primary treasure, and they're sufficient in themselves, definitely, for going back to Godhead. But, you have the whole 10th canto. Prabhupada wasn't able to finish it. But there's so many beautiful vibrations there. I mean, the Sanskrit language is so exquisite. Like you have these prayers of the gopis. You said, oh, I don't want to touch that. But many of them are completely innocent. The gopis are praying for Krishna. He's in the forest. They're at home. What do? They're absorbing themselves in hearing and chanting. That's all they want to do because they feel Krishna's present there, and it is there. So they say the hanta chittam abalashanutidam hara hasa urasista vidyut nandasuna nayamata jananam narmado yahikujitavinam. So they're remembering how wonderful it is. Oh, gopis, listen to this. This is wonderful. Shunutedam, listen to this. Hanta chittam abala, underdog means weak ones. This is for ladies. Abala shunutedam. Hara hasa. So this is, and all the great commentators, these towering intellects, like Sridhar Swami has analyzed this word, harahasa. What is the meaning? Because it's not some movie star. This is Krishna you're talking about. So harahasa means a necklace and a smile. Well, what is necklace and a smile? Oh, the necklace refers to his pearl necklace, and it's lying on his chest, just like a smile. Or, it has 4 different meanings. Or the necklace is reflecting the shine of his white teeth, you see? The pearl necklace. Or his teeth themselves are just like a pearl necklace, like that. So this is what they're spending their time in writing and meditating on, analyzing all these descriptions of Krishna. In this way, they're completely absorbed. Udasista Davidyat Nandasuna Nayamata Dananam Narmado Yari Kujitavenu. Kujitavenu, he's playing that flute so beautifully. And in doing so, he's giving pleasure to everyone who hears it, all the residents, not just the human ones, but all the animals, the plants, everyone is hearing that flute. And the rivers, what happens to the river? The rivers are so much in ecstasy, they stop flowing, and they're going around in whirlpools, they go like this. So this is what you find. And it's not hard to you can read these or memorize them. And then they become a means of staying in touch with Krishna at any time. The Hare Krishna mantra should always be chanted. But Prabhupada, he spent so much time speaking and, other things that derive from that, So what I'm saying is we have such wonderful opportunity now to immerse our minds in most delightful vibrations about Krishna. And also, serious understanding of how this universe is working, how it's what's created, where is our place in the universe, who are we, what's the nature of our body. All of this it feeds the intellect and increases our faith and attracts him for Krishna Katha. So that's the person who is mad after that, who simply absorbs himself, and that was Srila Prabhupada. That's where we should find that foot dust, meaning with the service. Because that service and that attraction for such a person it opens up the door to liberation. Mahat sevam dvaramaha vimuktes. This was, someone asked yesterday, who is that person? That was one of the questions. I didn't notice the next verse answers it. But it was interesting in that he uses the word mahat. Mahat, which is the same thing as Father used 3 lifetimes ago. Mahat sevam dvaramaha vimuktes, tomo dvaram yoshitang sangi sangam. Rishabdev is saying that service to the Mahats, the Mahatmas, the great devotees, opens up the door to liberation. Where Tamodvaram Yoshitang Sangi, but the doors to hell, darkness, is opened up by association with materialists, those who are too attached to the opposite sex or sense gratification in general. So what are we going to do? The choice is ours. Shall we associate with the great Mahatmas, or shall we associate with the materialists? And that's really the essence of our decision to be serious about our spiritual life, of being very careful of our association. And in this day and age, it can come through so many media. You can come to the internet and TV and everything. So it's all around us, but we can still decide to be serious about devotional service and search out that assembly of pure devotees where there's discussion only of the qualities, names, forms, pastimes of the Lord. And he's worshipped with full attention. That full attention is so important. So I think it's clear what this is all about. Cultivating that taste for hearing, it takes some work, but it's not only the door to liberation, but it's the door to unlimited happiness. Because, when can we not chant Hare Krishna? There's really no time, you see. And we've been given this like Krishna Karnamrita. Prabhupada talks about this book. Of course, it's there in the CC. Lord Chaitanya, he took it back. So many sweet verses. I was just give you an example. I was chanting this morning, and it's like totally free. It doesn't cost anything. I taught this to Nitya Gaur. Some of you remember. You remember Nitya Gaur? Yeah, he remembers it. Ahama kata kata nikada midda Lakshmi. Sadasada sadisiduha sadashidishi Devi. Devi. Rajayupati datikala havijah nija lila manamutata banana shashi manani mani liye. Now, admittedly, this is a little difficult to learn, but it's such a, it's such a play of words. Ahama kata. We've heard of the Himalayas, the abode of cold, of ice. So this is ahamakada, that which makes the opposite of cold, heat. It's a word for the sun. It's a made-up word. It's a word that he created. But ahamakada kada. Kada means hand. What are the hands of the sun? The sun rays, right? And nikada means a lot of sun rays. Ahamakada kada nikada midu midata Lakshmi. So the Krishna's eyes are being compared to the petals of lotuses whose beauty has been gradually increased by the gentle rays of the sun over time. In other words, the most beautiful lotuses in his eyes are just like the petals of that lotus. And it goes on like that. I won't get into it. But, it's a verse that's a little difficult. Why is it such a strange verse? So all of the commentators, they make the point, well, in this particular verse, Bilva Mangal Thakur, who's the author, he's feeling so much, ecstasy and separation from Krishna. He's lying on the ground, and wanting to be with Krishna, and he doesn't have the strength to chant the long syllables, so everything is in the short syllables. That is how they explain it. Anyway, I just ought to give that example. But the point is, these things are all now available. There's a nice English translation of that, and. We can take, of course, Prabhupada's books. You can obviously are completely full with these things. The Nectar of Devotion, so many beautiful descriptions of Krishna in the Krishna book, and we can make that the subject matter of our hearing and chanting and remembering and thinking, and we'll go back to Godhead. And also, we'll be part of that association that people can come to, and we can give them that seed of bhakti because we have it. We're not maybe pure devotees, but how does this movement grow? Devotees come, devotees who we have are planting that seed. And the most important thing is to plant the interest, the seed, so that they'll read the book and get Prabhupada's association. That's really how it's working. And so this is a wonderful passage here. This Rahuganaitad is one of the main verses that's quoted about how one can advance. One has to find a pure devotee. And it's interesting because he has all of this technical talk about the universe and how everything is dust and the creation and all this. But when it comes down to it, and the king is asking, well, I can't really figure out how to practice yoga from what you said. He says, find a pure devotee of Krishna, and bathe yourself in the dust. In other words, surrender, and everything will become clear. It always comes back to bhakti in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay. Do we have any questions?
Hare Krishna?
Yeah. We don't really have any time for comments right now, but questions. Yeah, go ahead, ask a question.
Yes, Dravida Prabhu, from the last sentence of the purport, I get that serving Krishna should be done seriously.
Yeah,
so,
a devotee is concerned only with serving Krishna positively and seriously. Go ahead.
Exactly. The general public, when they are in the presence of the Hare Krishnas, they could go for saying, our world is such a problematic world, and what is it that we see from the Hare Krishnas? Oh, they just chant, dance, feast, and the whole day discussing philosophy. They do not seem to us as consequential enough in order to solve the huge problems of this world. So my question is it that this train of thought is refutable? How would you refute, if it is refutable, the string of thought presented by at least some part of the general public? It
Okay,
may happen.
Vijay, I think I understand your question, but I don't know if my ears are getting worse, but I'm having more trouble understanding you than I have in the past. I think what I get at the gist, and if I'm not wrong, that here Prabhupada says the devotee is concerned only with serving Krishna positively and seriously, but the people in general, when they see us dancing and chanting, and they say, well, this is not very serious. They're, they don't take us seriously as a real religion. In other words, they're not impressed with that. Is that more or less it? And how can we...
Yes, that is the gist of my question.
Yeah.
They do not take us serious enough in order to solve the problems of the world.
Right. So the first point is that as far as judgment goes about what's serious and positive, we're not going to ask the materialists. They're immersed in ignorance about who they are, what the goal of life is, and how to achieve it, and where real value lies. That was the point of the little vignette we read early in the morning. That the fellow who came to Sanatana said, give me the greatest treasure, I understand. And Sanatana said, yeah, I have a touchstone over there. You can have as much gold as you want from the touchstone. He said, all right, I lucked out, but it was in a garbage heap. So he got the garbage heap and he was going away and said, wait a minute now. If this is his greatest treasure, he kept in the garbage heap. That doesn't make sense. So he went and asked him, why do you keep it in the garbage heap? And the answer is because he saw it as no more valuable than garbage. In other words, all the gold in the world was not what was really valuable. So he said, but I will give you the most valuable thing. But there's one, then the key was, which wasn't emphasized in the reading, you have to take that touchstone and throw it in the middle of the Yamuna. In other words, you have to have faith that material things is not, So in other words, the judgment of anyone would say, oh, forget it, I'm sticking with the touchstone. This is I cashed in. And then he goes away and doesn't get the blessing. So the point is that this is precisely what the problem is with the material vision, is everything is upside down. You're seeing as the most valuable thing is sense gratification and material benefit. But that's exactly what's keeping you bound to this world of suffering. Right there in the Bhagavad Gita, I quote this verse over and over again. Yehi sangsparshya bhoga dukkha yonayevate. The pleasures you're enjoying with the senses, and that includes the mind, in your metaverse or whatever, is the source of your misery. The worst, probably, quote, not verbatim, but just the happiness one experiences in material life is the worst enemy of those who are enjoying, because it keeps you bound here. Plants a desire in your mind, and even if you can't experience it, that takes you to another body to fulfill it. So the judgment of the materialist is completely rejected, and that's what you're talking about. The most positive and serious thing that we can do for ourselves and others is to chant Hare Krishna, is to have a nice kirtan outside in the street. This is what the essence is, preaching. So they're seeing exactly the opposite. That's their nature, viparya. So as Prabhupada said, we're not concerned with their opinion. They may think that we're a nuisance. This is a thing. Even in Bombay, this was what they were complaining against, that the kirtan in the early morning is a big nuisance. In Bombay, in India, because they've been so materialistic, they become, but Prabhupada persevered, got that land, built the temple, and now it's seen as a great place of pilgrimage. So the answer to your question is that, again, this is in a purport which just was expanding on the idea of who is a pure devotee, who is the person who we need to surrender to for our benefit. And that's the person, and the Shastra that they're giving us is giving us a judgment. What is serving? What is the service that the devotee can do to Krishna that is truly positive and serious? In other words, what does it mean to be a religious person and to actually serve God for one's own benefit and the benefit of others? So the answer is that a million people may go by the chanting party and think we're crazy, but we keep doing it anyway, because we know that they're crazy, and then if they hear the name once, they'll be benefited, so we'll give it to them. That's it, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Did you want to ask something? Go ahead, Prabhu.
Would you say it's more important than to memorize the verses of the Gita, which is just informational and anyone can do it? It's more important to recognize what you read between the lines, the essence of what the verse is saying, and that way you don't really have to memorize it, but you can communicate that essence to anyone that comes around.
I think I understand. The memorizing the verses is part of how we honor the Bhagavad Gita. But I would say that it's important to chant the verses because the sound itself is so auspicious, you know, and to read the translation and to really immerse oneself in Prabhupada's explanation. Because this is we're getting it. If we just read the translation, we're not going to really get the gist. The explanation there is Prabhupada is giving it specifically geared toward us, toward the Kali Yugites, and by hearing and understanding that those purports, then the seed is planted where we want to actually take up the practice. The whole idea is that, as I mentioned before, that this word normative, which Bhagavad Gita is 100% normative. It's something meant to guide your life. And throughout the Bhagavad Gita, we have instructions that Krishna gives to Arjuna, and that we can also take for ourselves. Like for instance, there's 2 verses in the 2nd chapter where Krishna summarizes how the living entity falls into deep illusion in the material world. He begins, Dhyato vishayan pumsa sangashteshu vijayate sangat sanjayate kama kama krodha vijayate. He's describing a series of activities that happen, or a succession of victimization. One begins by meditating on the object of the senses, and that, you know, they're all around us, something that just the ordinary materialist. And from that meditation, sangha develops, attraction. And if one pursues that attraction, it can turn into kama, very strong desire to enjoy. And by trying to enjoy the objects of the senses, we eventually become disappointed. And that can create great anger when we see someone is interfering with our enjoyment. So kama krodha abhijayate. And from krodha, bhavati sammoha. One can be completely bewildered, one can lose one's memory, and then you're down in the pool. So what's the solution? Next verse. Raga dvesha vimuktaistu vishayan indriyaishchadan atma vashay vidheyatma prasadam adhigacchati. This word vidheyatma, Prabhupada translated in mortal phrase, one who follows the regulative principles of freedom, process of devotional service. One can then come to the point of being free of raga and dvesha, even when moving amongst the object of the senses. Raga dvesha vimuktaistu vishayan indriyaishchadan. In other words, those very things that would drag your mind through your senses, that in your conditioned state, totally mayic state, don't affect you. You're able to stay equipoised because you're thinking of Krishna and you've lost the taste for Maya. So that one instruction of the Bhagavad Gita, as explained by Prabhupada, and giving us the practical means of doing it, that's the great value of these shastra in general. So I would say that memorization is a wonderful practice, but it should be integrated into a total process of devotion, the sadhana.
I have one more if that's enough time.
Okay, but then we have to go because it's getting late.
Earlier you said that a devotee does not discuss any matters of politics and all the other Maya stuff. 2 days ago we discussed the aspect of transcendental knowledge doesn't see duality in knowledge, it sees all things as one. So once you get to that point, would you still see those things as Maya, or do you incorporate that as part of this existence of the world, and you have to incorporate that in your perception of this reality, so you have a clear view of things?
Yeah, it's not that we don't know about them, and sometimes you'll find Srila Prabhupada, especially in his old Bhakti Godheads, he would, the first one is all about the war. It's in the middle of World War II, but he gave a Krishna conscious perspective to it. I worked on Bhakti Godhead for about 10 years, from 75 to 85 or so. And there was a whole section, the Vedic Observer, where we would take something that was going on, the oil embargo or whatever was happening, and we would give a Krishna conscious perspective to what we can understand from that and see the world in that way. So there's a place for that. It's not that we're completely oblivious to what's going on in the world. But we don't become absorbed hour and hour on discussing it, and there's a place, and then we withdraw it and come back to pure Krishna Katha. So Yeah, in a sense, it's like that. How is this world constructed? Why do I need to know about how the world came into being? We just need to know how to get out of it. But no, that's an important part of the Bhagavatam. The third canto, there's a whole chapter, the movement of the living entities, the workings of the material energy. So but it's always in context of how Krishna is the ultimate controller and doer, and he's giving us the ego, and So yeah, it's all a question of how we understand it in relation to the Supreme, and then how we can speak to others about it, because many people are absorbed in that, and so you can use that in order to attract their interest and see how then change their whole outlook of themselves and the world through that. So there's a place for it, but the point is we don't get so absorbed in it that we forget Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol. Sorry I went so late.